dad recently have been trying to do some stuff with credit cards. And I thought they were a relatively simple concept. You give them your number, and eventually you get billed for it. And there's not a lot for depth there. But sadly, it turns out there is. So there's some interesting questions about credit cards, like who issues them? Can you contest them? Like, can I say, this isn't my card, or someone stole my card, or something like that? What happens if I say that? Who's liable to pay the bill anyway if I contest them? How does the whole system actually work on the back end? I really didn't care about this until I started answering the first questions. And then all the documentation is about like physical transactions, and online transactions are a whole nother mess. So credit cards, they exist. They're actually issued by banks, which I didn't know. I thought the networks issued them, and they're not called networks, they're called credit card associations. So there's 4 credit card associations. I've only ever had Visa cards. Apparently that's not the normal situation in America. Like they each have about a quarter. Does everyone else here have a Visa card? Let's do some interactive show of hands. Okay, so those of you who aren't raising your hands, you match the rest of the world better, I think. So there's 4 big networks. These 3 were originally banks. Apparently this was originally the Sears Bank. I didn't know they had a bank. And Visa's some interesting conglomeration, which is why they're everywhere and they're also a little bit more messed up. But now, all 4 of those networks, there's like networks, they're called credit card associations, so all they do is connect credit cards to banks and vice versa. You can still get cards directly from a few of them, like Discover and I think American Express. Drill is nodding his head at me like I'm an idiot and everyone should know this, but I didn't. So how the payment system actually works is when you hand the person your card, what they do is a credit card authorization. So they just reserve a chunk of your credit limit. This is also why if you have like one of those Visa debit cards and you go to the gas station, it gets really complicated and you have to either enter numbers or go inside, because in that case, authorizations like this don't work out really well. And they have to know how much to authorize, because gas sales are sort of tricky, because they don't know how much you're going to take. And if they authorize you for $100 and you take $20,000 of gas, they're so what happens is you authorize, you sign your thingy, you walk away. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens in the background. So there's these things called acquirers. And so what they do is they act as a middle layer between the credit card association and the actual point of sale terminal. And so all the receipts get sent to them. It's called batching. I guess they're sent in batches. And they're like flushed like once a day or something like that. And then the acquirer actually talks to the credit card association and clears the bill and does the settlement. So they essentially talk to the credit card association, get money back, and then put it into the bank account tied to the point of sale place. And then funding is when the acquirer pays you back. And then the actual customer appears again. Because somewhere in here, there's this invisible step where the credit card association sends you a bill. And you read your bill and you go, wait a minute, I didn't buy $20,000 worth of Justin Bieber songs. And you call your credit card company and you complain an awful lot. And they do this thing called a chargeback, where they send a notice to the merchant and they say, if you don't do anything, you're not getting any money, and we just took all the money out of your bank account, so tough luck. And that's sort of the point that I care about, because I'm going to be acting as the merchant. So this is a toy example for those who don't really understand the depth of my problem. So Bob Joe Van Eisenhoot V complains to his bank about the money I charged him. And so the bank reverses my payment. It gives me this complaint. And this complaint might not be legible English. It might just be random stuff. There's no standard form for these complaints. There's a couple codes that aren't really used at all. And if you respond though, you might still be able to get them to pay you because you sent the your Bitcoins. But if you don't respond, you get nothing. So you have to actually like monitor this. And if you do respond and they do decide to pay you, it's still even more complicated because in some cases the bank is just going, oh look, it's only $5. And it's reversing the transaction for the customer, and by bank I mean the credit card association, or maybe your actual bank, depending on the level. So they're giving Bob Joe Van Eisenhoot his money back, but they're still giving money to the merchant and just giving the loss themselves, or they might actually force the guy to pay, which it sounds like never really happens, but is in fact a possibility. So with online transactions, it's sort of the same, right? Because it's all processed the same on the back end. But you get these interesting things called data storage requirements. So at this point of sale places, like a store, they've got a little box with a card reader. And so they never actually store your credit card information. Whereas if you're just rolling your own online payment system, you are storing your credit card information. And we live in America, and there's a lot of interesting laws. And one of them says if you start a credit card company, credit card numbers, you have to encrypt them. You can't let them get stolen. If you do, you're in a shitload of trouble, and there's some other stuff. And so it actually makes it relatively tricky to process cards. And I'm sort of lying to you when I say that. And you don't actually have a physical card, you're just getting some numbers and stuff. So it's really hard to say, well, look, here's my video cam footage of the guy walking into my store and signing this receipt, which I have here with his signature, and taking, his little stuffed animal out. Right? You can't do that because it's all via the internet, and there's a lot more ways to sort of hide it. And you can keep logs and be like, look, it came from his neighborhood in Seattle based on GeoIP, and look, stuff like that. And then you have people like me who are routing their internet through Sweden. It gets more complicated. And so it's sort of a giant mess. So why I've been researching all this is BitToll needs credit card to BitToll conversions. Because it's sort of ridiculous to go to someone and be like, hey, use my extension. By the way, you need to set up a 3-layer transaction system where you deposit money from your bank account to Twilio, which is deposits and outbox. Or you then buy some Bitcoins on this exchange, and after this 3-day process, you're allowed to use this extension you just installed. That's sort of ridiculous. In fact, I would never use the extension. I'm writing it. So what I really need is a really simple way where you can pay credit cards and use Bitcoins. Preferably in a way, since I'm doing this myself, that I don't lose a lot of money on. And no one does this. There are people who sort of do something sort of similar in that they might take a bank transfer, but they lose a lot of money doing that, and they're not even using credit cards directly. But the real problem is that you can't reverse a Bitcoin transaction. So if Drill hands me 10 bucks and I give him a Bitcoin, and then Drill goes, ha, those are Zimbabwean dollars and are worth like less than toilet paper, and runs away, I can't get my Bitcoins back. It's impossible. But you can reverse credit cards. I just talked about chargebacks. Everyone understood that? An audience participation? Okay. And so there's this huge fraud opportunity, which is why, I think I misspelled opportunity, which is why no one does credit card or Bitcoin conversions. So I think it's totally possible. And I lied to you when I said online payments are hard. There's this thing called Stripe, it's a payment engine. Most of you have heard of this. How many people have heard of Stripe? Raise your hands.
It kind of sucks.
It kind of sucks?
It has really high fees.
Yeah, you're right. It has high fees. It charges 2.9% plus 30 cents. Yeah, but the reason it charges those fees is that credit card companies charge fees, which I didn't talk about. And what's even more fun is they charge different fees depending on who your acquirer is, which I guess in this case is Stripe's acquirer, whatever. What type of card it is, how much you're billing, all this stuff. So like in some cases, charging an American Express card costs like 10 bucks.
But on average, it'll be below 1%. You should contact your bank and inquire about processing for them. It will probably be around 1% plus $20 a month.
Yeah, but there's one reason why I want to use Stripe, which is they have an automated API for when I receive disputes, they'll send me an email. And that's really golden, because otherwise I'm never going to notice them, ever. Because I'm incompetent and I don't check my bank account regularly. So that's really the whole reason I'm using Stripe. But to get around to like Bitcoin's, the credit card to Bitcoin conversion, I'm doing a couple things. So one, you only can buy $5 increments of Bitcoins, which makes the payment amount sort of silly because I just increased the Bitcoin price by 10% and making 2% profit on my Bitcoin payments, excluding chargebacks. So that's the first thing. You're only buying in a $5 increment. So it makes the system useless unless they want to use my extension. Because the $5 increment worth of Bitcoins is too small for most people who want large amounts of Bitcoins, and too large for most people who want really small amounts of Bitcoins. So it makes it extremely inflexible unless you're using my system. And I'm also limiting the number of payments that people can make per month. So you can't buy more than 20 bucks of Bitcoins through the system per month, period. I don't care who you are. You can call me up and send me your password. I'm going to laugh in your face.
How do you keep track of it?
So each BitToll account, so basically when you're using the plugin, you have a unique BitToll account and there's some alias stuff so you can figure out what it is from any machine. And I'm just recording how much money they bought that month through BitToll. I'm using the magic of expiring keys in a funky fashion to,
so you couldn't just generate BitToll accounts?
You totally could just generate BitToll accounts. Yeah, I know, like, you totally do that. We're radically fake this whole thing. But to be honest, the bank's gonna notice like 5,000 charges of $5. So if you want to rip money off the card, you're just gonna buy like a computer monitor or something for like 800 bucks and be done with it, right? I'm trying to make this an inefficient scheme for fraud, not an impossible one.
how would it be used for fraud?
So I steal Jarrell's credit card, and I go, well, haha, I have his credit card. I can now use it for online payments, because obviously he lives in Troy, and I have his card, so I know his CVV too. So I go up to BitToll, and I go, I want to buy $1 million worth of Bitcoins. And I use the bad BitToll system, and I type in $1 million, and I hit OK. And the system gives me $1 million in Bitcoins. And then I withdraw them, and then the card gets denied. And I have $1 million worth of Bitcoins, and Colin Rice has lost all his money. And his parents' money, and everyone else who you can legally get money from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. And then the bank like reverses the chargeback, so you probably don't lose $1 million, but I would. Does that make sense? If that's the root of the problem?
I don't think the $5 limit is going to really help.
Oh yeah, no, people could totally steal like $20 from me a month. And I'm hoping no more than like 1,000 people use it, so I can pay that. Like I'll be ecstatic if someone steals money from me using this system. I'll be so ecstatic if someone's using it.
And a little flag that on the bank account, like on the card.
Yeah, and
flag it instantly.
yeah.
Yeah, so
If you're making 30 transactions with 250 to the same transaction, your bank account's gonna be like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah, hopefully fraud prevention will hit at that point.
Yeah.
And I actually have one more idea that will in fact solve this problem, not just make it inefficient. The inefficient things are that deter people from using it, because they're going to read that and go, oh, well, this is a worthless system to steal money. This is the part that might actually help me. And so BitToll knows this idea of unconfirmed balance, because you can mine through them to get money that's Bitcoins that you can't withdraw until the system actually gets the money that you can spend inside the system. And so I'm just going to make the credit card money act like that unconfirmed balance, except it's confirmed after 7 days. And so it's totally possible to revoke your credit card payment on the 8th day. That's where I can count to 8. But hopefully most people will realize that I'm doing this. I don't know. Like I think that having an unconfirmed balance is going to do it. The issue is that there's no time limit on chargebacks. But the longer you wait on the chargeback, the more likely the bank's going to be like, dude, you bought that like can of
there's a
tequila.
time limit, it's just really long.
Yeah, well, it's
Like, I
think it's 30 days on the actual network, but they
With
do
the
have.
Discover card, I think it's 180 days or something. Like it's long enough that you can't really use it.
I know Visa has a 30-day limit technically in their network, but they can do essentially reverse transactions at any point after that, and it just shows up a little differently. So you can still get screwed, but the longer you wait to reverse the chargeback, the more I can say you just forgot that you did it, and it's more likely they'll get my money. And so 7 days is a reasonable level, because in all honesty, if someone steals a card, they're not going to make like $2 payments once a month for the next 5 years. They're going to buy a bunch of money immediately until the system is triggered, and then they're going to get rid of the card. Or you're going to notice that someone stole your card out of your pocket, or whatever. Like it's bears and frauds that last for long periods of time. So that's the plan. Jarrell's already told me that it's a really dumb plan. Does anyone else
No,
think
I
that's
actually think that's reasonable.
That's reasonable? Right. Does anyone else think that's reasonable? Think it's really dumb? Think I shouldn't have wasted your time for for a presentation on credit cards?
I have a question more than that. So if, as part of the scenario, as you're waiting, how to describe this? So if the person realizes, hey, where's my credit card, and then calls the credit card, how does that come back to your system?
So they call their bank, or they call the credit card agency, which is a chargeback, which hits the acquirer, which then hits Stripe, which then has an API thingy that I can access to get the disputes, and also sends me an email. And then I can go to my dashboard and go, no, they totally paid me. Here's the stuff I made them enter. Here's the my name is blah that I made them enter in a text box at the bottom, and they already spent the Bitcoins. They totally got what they're worth. And that will work in all cases except identity fraud.
Well, with identity fraud, though, there's a little bit more to it because what normally happens is with a credit card, there's a little thing that says that if your card gets stolen, you think it's being used illegally or whatever, let them know as soon as possible. And if you do that within whatever they consider as time, like usually it's like a couple days, so as soon as you use them, the credit card or the bank that's backing it will cover those charges if the things are in good shape. You notify all the merchants that you bought things from. But if they've already shipped the goods out, they'll just pay.
Okay, that's
And it
good.
actually comes out to be millions of dollars a year that that happens from. But the fees, which is part of why those transaction fees end up being so high, because they need to cover the
The losses.
1% of transactions that are fraudulent and goods have already shipped.
Yeah. And they got some interesting legislation saying you can't charge credit card people more. in the US code, which is why that works out. But the problem is that, so I take some of the Bitcoins on my own server, is that actually being delivered?
Probably can't do that.
True, but I actually own the server, so I could give it back. It'd just be a huge pain in the ass and that computation would be impossible, but it's still on my server, technically, and in my Bitcoin wallet, right? So I'm worried that banks will try and argue it that way. I'm not sure if they'll care too much.
Well, they
But-
will pay for digital goods.
They will.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay, well then I might not be
Because-
screwed.
Your goods may be a license to use a piece of software. That particular piece of software doesn't cost you anything other than the development costs that went into it.
Okay,
But
well
they'll
then,
still cover the cost if you gave the licenses.
well then in this
So you
case,
can't really revoke the license once it's given. It's not something for a while.
yeah, well then I guess I might not be screwed.
Yeah, I don't think they would actually be able to take the money from a fraudulent transaction.
Interesting. Well then this might work. I'm excited, and I just have to do all the legal paperwork.
Okay, this gets big. You see the thing that happened in California with the state sort of.
Talking about the DHS shutting down every single way to turn Bitcoins into US dollars inside of the United States of America.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a reason I'm going to be talking to a lawyer next week.
Okay, good.
And in reality, that's a little trickier because what happened was initially when these Bitcoin markets came out, the IRS was like, what the hell is a Bitcoin? And didn't really believe it was currency. And so all these pieces called the IRS and like, so we're filling out our business forms. There's a little checkbox for saying that we're doing a financial money changer, essentially. We're a financial firm, we deal with money, we convert money between various currencies. Are we a financial firm? And they said no, and so they didn't check the box. And then 2 years later, the DHS shut down all their accounts because they didn't check the box. So I think all I need to do is check the box. I really seriously think that's all I need to do. I want to talk to a lawyer because I feel like if I check the box, I have to start keeping a bunch of records. And that I am a Canadian citizen though, so this might get incorporated in Canada, which would be a whole nother interesting legal question. And as a Canadian citizen, you're technically allowed to incorporate companies in other Commonwealth countries, like certain of them. So I might be able to incorporate in some Commonwealth country and like the southwest part, like the Caribbean, where they still have the Queen as a queen and there's like 50 people who live on an island. So like, there are options. The options get more and more sketchy as they go away from America. But yeah, so that's my backup plan. Any other questions? Well, I want to go home. Want me to go talk? Okay, well, if you get like a C- in audience participation, Trell smiled 3 times. That's why you're not getting a D. People raise their hands. But come on, I'm just a guy. Like, ask questions, yell insults at me. Whatever. How many people enjoyed this presentation?
Okay, so I have a question. I had a practical question. So I booked a ticket to India. When I booked my ticket through a MasterCard, as soon as I booked a ticket, then I made a stupid, I wanted to check what kind of a company I booked the ticket to. I found I got reviews that were pretty bad. So I called the bank and I said I paid and it is a mistake, so please hold on to that amount, don't pay the amount. Then for the next 1 week I couldn't use my credit card. So that everything worked, but I couldn't use the credit card. So that became a big problem. And not only that, after the next one week, whatever the transactions I make, I get a call, did you make that transaction, did you make the transaction, etc. So the only way I overcame that is to have, for internet transactions, I have a credit card. For something else, I have another credit card. That's how I temporarily solved the problem. But what will happen in your case if I reverse a transaction?
That's a good question. So first, I want to talk about your case, just because there's a couple possibilities. So one of them is that you just made the fraud detection machine learning system go berserk, and that's why you got in trouble. The second one is that your authorization limit was exactly how much you paid for the ticket, which sounds unlikely.
Yeah, the only thing, the reason I even got a second credit card is my authorization limit is very high.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's not it. There's also this thing called forcing the transaction. So if you go back to the like steps of a credit card transaction, by the way, this all came out with Wikipedia, I swear, and like the Visa website, not a lot of research here. Well, there is some research, it's like 8 hours of research, but not a lot of research. I didn't call anyone. So this step doesn't actually have to happen. And so what probably happened is you booked your ticket, and it went through and it got denied. And they went, well, screw you, Professor Morthy, we want our money. And so they kept resubmitting the freaking payment, and the bank kept denying the payment. But they kept authorizing chunks of your credit limit. And so eventually they had like 15 authorizations using up your credit limit that they never could get accepted. And so basically the denial of service to your credit card. And this is apparently how like hotels will do it and stuff, is even if this fails, they can still put it in the batch and try and force it. And then it becomes a giant legal mess, and hotels are willing to fight the giant legal mess. And apparently, that Indian plane company bought the giant legal mess and lost in a way that messed you up. But that's sort of one of the things. But what happens in Bitbull? So I'm actually going to be running this credit card system in a sort of paranoid mode. So normally when you do this authorization, that was on another slide. I swear I had it up there. What happens is it hits the acquirer, which does a quick authorization against the bank. The banks are really lazy, and so generally all they check is that it's a valid card number. They don't check CVV2, they don't check the rest of it. So it's totally possible to write down your card number and then say you're Bob the Martian from Australia, and it'll still go through. And it might even go through the whole process successfully. But you can force the bank to tell you whether or not each of these fields passed. And if one of them didn't pass, you can say, you know what, I revoke the authorization, cancel this transaction, even though the bank accepted it. And so I'm going to be running it in a more paranoid mode like that. So hopefully, if the fraud engine is denying me, I'm not going to make like 15 authorizations as they keep hitting the submit button. I'm going to make one, it's going to get denied, and we're just going to be done.
Okay, I have another, this I call this a brilliant suggestion. So Don Bluth used to pay money for check for all, if people find mistakes in his book, he used to send checks. So
The
that
checks are worth so much more than the 50 cents he pays you.
yeah, right, yeah. So, but on the other hand, so people don't use cash the check, and it became a nightmare for him. But more importantly, what people started doing is posting the checks in an image. So with the result, they have the routing number.
Exactly.
So using that routing number, they started getting money, using, making him pay extra money and so on. With the result that he stopped any payment. He says that he will write a check to Caribbean Bank or something. So it is a file which says that this person owes this much check. My suggestion is you should offer a bit toll suggestion. You should sign checks to bit toll. So bit toll will be an authorization. So that is question number one. And how do I have suppose he sends me a bit toll coin for $1.50, $2.56 or something. How do I make that as an image showing that I received $2.56 and I don't want to cash it?
Got it. So first, so I'm still a little confused. I totally know what you're talking about with his payments and bank fraud and why you stopped doing that, and I've seen the file and I tried to find a problem and couldn't, that's why I didn't get the reward or whatever. But, so what is the first question? Like, can you show that you have a balance to other people? Or can you show that you got a transaction?
I got a transaction, that's all I wanted to show.
No. There are no transaction logs in Bitbull.
Oh.
You actually have no idea where your money came from or where it went. So yeah, no, you can't do that. There's no transaction log. Honestly, it just makes it too computationally expensive because then you have to record every transaction. And I'm a poor college student, so I don't want in reality, I might become forced to for certain credit card transactions. But yeah, no, there's no real way to record transactions in Bitbull. And in fact, the transaction object itself disappears after, it's like, I don't remember the limits. I think it's like an hour after being paid or after 24 hours otherwise. So that doesn't exist. The second part though is I've actually been thinking about, because Bitbull is all open source. And the cool thing about doing this for something that handles money is that if someone finds a bug, they can find the bug and they can tell you about it and it can get fixed before someone exploits it. And everyone can look at the code and be sure you're not an idiot, you didn't do some giant backdoor that will charge everyone $10 million. But until this starts making money, I'm not going to be paying money out of it for finding security bugs just because there's no money there. But I think it'd be cool to pay people in an automated fashion for finding security bugs. I'm not sure how to work it. The first priority is getting someone to use it. That's like the fifth priority. The fourth priority is like not getting hacked. And then once that happens, it's fixing it. And then somewhere down the line is paying people to fix it for me. Maybe that's before I get hacked. I don't know. But so yeah. I don't know if I answered your question. I just rambled further. Any other questions?
You mentioned that if the It should just go through the first time, you just cancel that card, like not, like what if I have to type in my name or something?
So what actually happens is the payment fails, and we tell you the payment fails. You're totally kosher to try it with the exact same details again. We don't stop it, we don't keep logs of the cards you used. In fact, that information never actually hits our system, it's all stored in Stripe. You can do that, but we're telling Stripe to be really paranoid about accepting cards. So hopefully, if it gets denied once, Stripe is just gonna stop.
Right, but if you know,
Querying. But if there's a typo, you just change it and resubmit it, it should go through.
With Stripe, do you have control over authorizations and stuff? I don't think you do.
So you don't have control of the
Basically, you just
authorizations.
sort of say, someone wants to use a credit card, you deal with it Stripe, and let me know.
Exactly. There's two things that you can change in Stripe. You can tell Stripe to force them to verify the CVV2 code, and you can tell them to force verify billing zip code. That's it. And you can actually like cancel stuff and
What
refund
about,
stuff.
like, business cards and stuff? Because I've run into that problem in some places where, let's say, they use verified by Visa, which varies from bank to bank, but generally it's a second passphrase and then shipped.
I used to have this problem by sending my mom's credit card to it. You know, like,
Yeah, so if I do a transaction over $200 with someone who doesn't support verified by Visa, my card will be rejected. Because they don't know how to do verified by Visa, and the bank's like, well, no, if you're not. It basically just fails a verified by Visa check.
Yeah. So
It's not right.
there's two parts. One, all these transactions are $5.
Right.
That's the first point. Might have been a smart point accidentally. Second part is that I have no control over that, honestly. It's just gonna get denied. You're gonna have to go find another credit card or something. This is really only existing because no one else does this. And there's gonna be a second part, which is gonna be withdrawals from Tilda bank accounts, but I think that's even gonna be more of a nightmare. So this is gonna be the first step.
I'll take a chance.
No, that's not happening. Stripe has a withdrawal of bank account API, which is why that part is happening. But yeah, I'm not dealing with any of that. This is just a service, and if it fails, tough luck, find your Bitcoin some other way. But it should work for the majority of people who have cards that accept internet transactions for $5. And you know, if you're in a unique situation and trying to find Bitcoins with your business card, you're probably doing something sketchy. Just being honest. All right, so everyone done? I can sit down. We can all go your separate ways. Okay.